Good afternoon, and thank you for those of you. Good afternoon, and to those of you on the West Coast, good morning. Thank you for joining us together as we celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Today, we are reflecting and sharing ways to lift up the strength, resilience, and rising power of AANHPI workers across the country in our labor movement and our broader fight for economic and social justice. If we have not yet had a chance to meet, I am James Chan, SEIU's API Civic Engagement Director, and I'm excited to be moderating today's discussion. Unfortunately, SEIU Executive Vice President Joseph Bryan, who was slated to moderate today, could not make it. He is recovering from COVID, and we wish him a very speedy recovery. I want to express my gratitude to all the SEIU staff who have put this event together and worked hard on all the activities throughout May to celebrate AANHPI Heritage Month. It's an important occasion for us to recognize the rich contributions and diverse cultures of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Today, we are honored to have some very special guest speakers with us, including partners of SEIU and SEIU member leaders who are raising the bar for AANHPI members and voters. So first, it is my honor to introduce former Georgia Representative Bee Nguyen, who in 2017 made history by being elected the first Vietnamese American to serve in the Georgia House of Representatives, as well as the first Asian American to run for statewide office in Georgia. She took over the seat vacated by none other than Stacey Abrams. Following a valiant run for Georgia's Secretary of State in the last midterm, Bee is now applying her legislative and electoral experience as a state director for Senator Raphael Warnock, extending her influence all the way to Congress. Bee?
Bee Nguyen, and I'm a representative in Georgia. And when I was elected in 2017, I became the first Asian American Democratic woman to be elected in the Georgia General Assembly, and also the first Vietnamese American. In 2022, when I won the Democratic nominee for Georgia Secretary of State, I became the first Asian person to win a party nominee on either side of the aisle for any statewide position. I'm currently the state director for Senator Warnock, who is a champion for workers. But today I'm here in the capacity of being an Asian American woman and the daughter of Vietnamese refugees. My parents fled their country in the late 70s in search of basic civil liberties. They fled in the middle of the night on a boat, and it was a Thai fisherman who found them at sea and brought them to a refugee camp in Thailand, where my older sister was conceived. She was the very first born American in my family, born on July 4th in 1979. And her name is Betty Davis. My dad's very first job in America was as an orderly at a state hospital working in the psychiatric ward, where he took care of 4 patients at a time, 8-hour shifts for $3 an hour. My first job was pushing groceries when I was 15 at Winn-Dixie in the hot Georgia sun in Augusta, Georgia, making minimum wage. And for every 4 hours of work, I received a 15-minute break. I didn't know at the time this was because of organized labor. I have always been pro-worker because I know firsthand what it is like to be working poor. I know firsthand what it's like to work in industries that don't provide protections and benefits for workers. I also know, as an Asian American, oftentimes our stories are not told, and we often only hear about the successes within our own community. It's important for us as Asian Americans to uplift our other AAPI brothers and sisters. In the Vietnamese community, for example, Asian women, Vietnamese women, only make 64 cents on the dollar compared to a white non-Hispanic man. And over 30% of Vietnamese people work in the service industry. That's hospitality, nail salons, and we know a portion of our Vietnamese community also works in the agricultural industry. We know that many of these workers are not protected. So I want to thank SEIU for all the work that you do for all of workers, and because you understand it's not just about fighting for the rights of workers, it's about building solidarity across diverse communities. As an Asian woman living in Georgia, I have always called upon my AAPI brothers and sisters to stand in solidarity with the Black community, with the Latino community, and understand that we are fighting and we are in this together. Now, 2 years ago, a gunman brutally murdered 6 Asian women in Atlanta. And I remember thinking, that could have been my mother, my grandmother, my auntie. These women were working in highly vulnerable industries during the height of the pandemic, and it would take us days to even learn some of their names. In that moment, the AAPI community, alongside our brothers and sisters who showed us solidarity, reminded us of what it's like to be invisible, what it's like to not feel seen, not to feel heard. And so as we celebrate AAPI Heritage Month, it is important for us to tell those stories that are untold, to remember our long-standing history in America, from the Chinese rail workers to the Japanese Americans who were incarcerated, to the Vietnamese refugees who were the subject of attack by the KKK, to our Muslim brothers and sisters following 9/11. We cannot forget our history of organizing, and the laws in this country that have been discriminatory towards our community. We also can't forget that when we remember this history, we are called to action, and we are called to action to stand in solidarity with those across our country who are fighting for a just world. And so during AAPI Heritage Month, I am very proud to be a Vietnamese American woman. I am proud to be an Asian American woman. I am proud of the successes in our community, but I also want to uplift the untold stories, the invisibility that so many people feel. And I want to call upon us to honor the history of AAPIs in our country and to continue that fight for workers' rights and for racial and economic justice. Thank you all so much for the work you do. And as always, Union Strong.
Thank you, B. Wow, I think we can all be inspired by your public service and your tireless leadership to defend voting rights in Georgia and across our country. Next, I want to introduce 2 incredible leaders who are laser focused on engaging and mobilizing AANHPI voters across the country and defending our voting rights. First is Christine Chen, co-founder and executive director at APIA Vote, and Nadia Nisha Belkin, founding executive director at the Asian American Power Network. Christine?
Thank you, James, and thank you, SEIU, for taking this leadership and celebrating Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. API Vote is a leading national nonprofit focusing on building political power by increasing civic and participation among Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. We do this everything from getting out the count on census, in monitoring voting rights and advocating on voting rights, on redistricting, and also, of course, every single year focusing on increasing voter registration and turnout of our communities for every single election. We do this by working with local nonprofits in over 29 states. These are local trusted messengers, really, connected with the wide variety and diversity of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. We do this by focusing first on building their capacity through our Norman Y. Mineta Leadership Institute. Every single year, we go around the country, hosting 10 to 12 trainings, focusing on, voter registration and best practices, to also media literacy and fighting dis and misinformation. By building up their capacity, then our local nonprofits are able to implement a vigorous field plan. We focus mostly on low propensity voters. This means these are 18 to 24-year-olds, also first-time voters, as well as limited English proficients. For example, during the 2022 midterm elections, we were able to mail out 2 million mailers to 1 million households with translated mail. That ended up having 33 different versions in 16 different languages, reaching 17 different states. And then with our local partners, they were able to follow up with phone banking and text banking in language. We know this works because as soon as the mail dropped, we received thousands of phone calls on our 888 API vote hotline, which we managed with the Asian American Advancing Justice, AJC, and we're able to provide them assistance in language as well. Another area where we focus on is youth engagement. We also develop and partner with local student organizations in a wide variety of different college campuses across the country to essentially do the same, to build up their capacity and help them implement a field plan that they could also reach and increase voter participation in their region as well. As we know, early voting is actually a crucial component to getting out the vote for our communities. Since 2020, as well as 2022, over 2/3 of our community are voting early or by mail. And we're only able to do that when our community-based organizations are providing the information that is needed. So that way these new voters and limited English proficient voters are able to understand how to make their best plan to vote, especially if they want to vote early. Other areas that we focus on is ensuring that everyone out there that's interested in getting out the vote for all communities understands the AAPI electorate. That means since 2012, we've been implementing an Asian American voter survey where every 2 years we provide insights on our community in terms of their leanings, what are the issues that they care about, and also their thoughts in terms of who they may be supporting and what local parties are reaching out to them. In addition, we also have state-specific fact sheets to make your job a lot easier and to be able to talk about and understand the communities and the API electorate in your own particular state. With all this information and all these tools, we look forward to partnering up with SEIU. It's been over a decade when we first started back in 2014, where I also would like to thank SEIU for your leadership, for investing in us almost a decade ago, because you were one of the first investors who understood the importance of our electorate, whether it was in Nevada or Georgia, Virginia, or also in California and New York. So with that, I also like to invite all of you to our presidential town hall of June of 2024, where we will gather thousands of AAPI voters to listen to the various candidates and where they stand and how they will address and engage our base of growing voters in itself. So thank you very much.
Hi, all. My name is Nadia Nisha Balkin. I'm the Executive Director of the Asian American Power Network. It is truly a privilege to be with you all today as we celebrate AANHPI Heritage Month. I just wanted to say a massive thank you as well to SEIU for taking the time to have a conversation such as these. We are part of a broader ecosystem where we work with our partners in labor, we work with APIA Vote, and now AAPN has been created to continue the work in the electoral space as we are a national network of state-based 501c4s. I think there's a real beauty in us having a conversation about the way the work has evolved and the way that our infrastructure is now growing to meet the needs of our community. So thank you very much for having us. The Asian American Power Network, as I mentioned, is a national organization comprised of state-based 501c4s. That means that we are actually focused on more of the electoral and direct advocacy work. We actually pick up and complement the work of the work that the C3s do. So we work very closely with APIA Vote and with partners like yourself in the labor space. We realized back in 2018 that we really needed to build this infrastructure because we had seen through the civic engagement work that voters were starting to ask questions about who do you vote for and why. It's a very privileged position, and through our 501c4 status, we have been able to take on that work. How do we do that? First and foremost, we're doing that in partnership with groups like you all, because we understand that our voters need to understand what is at stake for them. When we talk about being pro-worker, being pro-labor, our voters need to understand exactly what that means. Who are the candidates that are going to advocate for them? What are the policies that are moving that will impact them? And where are the deficits that we're seeing? How do we need to make more change and more policy advocacy? So we created this network in 2022 because we understood that the work was happening in a lot of different states. If you look at our map, we're actually present in a lot of the battleground states, which does mirror often the SEIU map, which is phenomenal for our on-the-ground partner relationships. This is a grassroots-driven network, and what makes us really unique is the fact that we are in states 365 days a year. That is really part of our theory of change, where we want to be in community with Asian American voters, making sure that they understand what's at stake and what is on the ballot. We're doing this work by also executing multimodal programs, which means that we are on doors, on phones, in your inbox, really trying to make sure that we are meeting voters where they are. It's probably not a secret for you all to know that our community needs greater and deeper investment. And so we're doing that by physically being in states and on the ground with our voters. Christine also talked about doing some of the work in language. And so that is a key cornerstone of our work as well. All of our work does happen in language, whether that's phone, whether that's mail pieces, because we know that the types of voters that we're courting may be low English proficiency, they may speak other languages in our house, and we know that there is a very unique cultural component to the work that we must do. So we have really focused on building out stakeholder partnerships because we see ourselves as trusted messengers in the 501c4 space. You can think of us as translators in the traditional sense, moving from English to whatever native language we know our voters are in, but we're also doing the education and advocacy within that C4 lens as well. I do want to shout out SEIU Local 1199, who partnered with us in our electoral work in Pennsylvania last year. It was a beautiful partnership where we were able to harness the power of the membership to come down and talk to the voters in Pennsylvania about what was at stake and the way that the candidates we were advocating for did have a pro-worker, pro-labor agenda. We are really focused on developing those partnerships and focusing on you all as the experts to help us develop our rapport and our expertise and our vocabulary around these key labor issues. We look forward to continued partnership and are grateful for the work that has already happened, and we look forward to strengthening that relationship as we move forward. If you're interested in the 12 states that we are currently active in with current plans for expansion, you can find us online at www.aapowernetwork.org. Again, thank you so much for having us and for your partnership and work.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you, Christine, for sharing your in the trenches insight with us. We are certainly looking forward to working with your organizations as the 2024 race heats up. Next, I'm excited to introduce Jan Park, a member leader at SEIU 1021 in the Bay Area, who will talk about some incredible work happening across California with fast food workers and healthcare clinic workers. Jan, please take it away.
Thank you, James. Hello, thank you for having me today. Again, my name is Jan Park. I am rehabilitation counselor at Alameda County Behavioral Health Care and SEI Local 1021 Vice President of the East Bay region. As being a Korean immigrant, has struggled fight back against the this Asian stigma about having to be quiet and being submissive. But I refuse to be silent on important issues that affect so many people in my community, in my union. When I see so many fast food and healthcare workers, many who are workers of color and immigrants, struggling to put food on the table for their children and working in unsafe condition, I will not just stand by. They can be in our community for my niece, it can be your nephew, or grandma who just immigrated to the United States to make a better life and provide better opportunity for their children. This is one of the reasons that I am so active in my community and my union. That in California, James, you mentioned last year we won California Assembly Bill 257, which was a landmark victory for fast food workers in California. Not only with the low, it's a win for the better pay, but it will give fast food workers at the table to discuss work issues with their bosses and the government. This is huge for also AAPI community in California. 80% of fast food workers are people of color, Black, Latino, and AAPI. And AAPI's workers in fast food is nearly double since 2010. But we are still fighting back against the billionaire burger companies have qualified for a referendum, which is put AB 257 on hold until November of 2024. On top of that, we are fighting to win $25 an hour for healthcare workers through the clinics campaign. This campaign represents a lot of AAPI workers. They are the technician support and intake screeners. They do also provide COVID testing community during the pandemic. They provide vital public services in community healthcare across the California. Just like fast food workers, a lot of these healthcare workers are not getting paid livable wages. They aren't receiving the same support they provide to our community. They are struggling to have a get basic needs for their families to provide food on the table. So children can focus on their school and they study. Many have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends to meet. Some of members from 10 to 1 told me that they're really having difficulty with their bonding with their children or grandchildren because they are taking times away from school or family to get a job to help support their families. This poor lower wage pay is hurting our children for the future generation to come. In healthcare, workers are being forced to look for different jobs, as you all know. This means that the whole community is loose at support. This means also that the remaining workers are overworking with the extra work they have to take it on because they have a shortage of healthcare workers at the community clinics, which puts both the workers and community at risk. The California Senate Bill 525 would raise the ceiling of the healthcare workers at the clinics to $25 per hour, which is where California minimum wage at $15.50 currently. The majority of workers who would benefit from these raises are workers of color. And these workers of color at 18%, probably over 19% AAPI healthcare workers, where we see their wages will be raised. So our fight for fast food and clinic workers would raise the income ceiling for AAPI community and workers and other low wage workers as well. It's not just about the improving working condition or increasing their wages. This is about human life, and then it's about changing people's life. This is not a time to be quiet and shy. It's time to use our voices and be an advocate for our community. That's why I am fighting. I want everybody to join in this fight. And also just in addition to all this fight, but there is another rally happening in May 25th at state capitol for supporting $25 for the healthcare workers. So I hope you are joining on May 25 at 10 a.m. In Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan, for telling us about your work and how it impacts our AA and HPI communities. Next up, we'll be traveling down to the beautiful California coast to Agnes Braga at Local 99 in Los Angeles. As you may recall, our members in LA's public schools had a huge victory earlier this year. They launched a 3-day strike and the whole world was watching. Agnes, please tell us how it all happened.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Agnes Braga. I was born in the Philippines and I am an American 60 cents. I am a speech language pathology assistant and also known as a SLPA in Los Angeles Unified. I'm a proud member of SEIU Local 99. Throughout the schools in Southern California, we are the cafeteria workers, janitors, groundskeepers, bus drivers. We're the special ed assistants, campus aides, and supervision aides. We're the ones who deliver the supplies, the food, the mechanics. We're the ones who care for the kids before and after school and help parents when they want to volunteer for their children's school. We're everything else but the teachers. We are the backbone of LAUSD, but we're never given that respect. Many of us are API, Latino, Black, and people of color. Our workers aren't paid fairly. Teachers' assistants are told to work 4 hours, then work the next shift as supervision aides, forcing workers into 2 job classifications so they don't have to pay their health benefits. Community representatives who work with parents to beautify the schools they work in are only given 4 hours to work. They volunteer the rest of the 2 hours so they can stay with their children at school. So many workers work 2 to 3 jobs and sometimes volunteer their time so the kids get the education and care they deserve. I tell them, why are you working for free? You are worth every penny. We see public support for teachers, but no one knows how to support classified workers like us. We must speak up for ourselves. I remember at one LA Fed meeting, a teacher just finished on the mic and riled up the crowd. Everyone thought it was over, but I grabbed the mic and said, "We're not done yet. Let me tell you about my members." This year, after a year or so of contract negotiations, we stood together to demand respect for the work we do. To be honest, there was some fear and hesitation. When talks of a strike started circulating, members were calling me. APIs don't want to do anything to rattle a calm environment, but at the same time, they know this is important for their families. They know they need a raise. They know they can't afford to spend more help on healthcare. I reminded them that we are worthy of respect. It was when we held a march at Grand Park in front of City Hall that they saw the huge turnout and support and sea of purple. Even the teachers stood with us. Our members witnessed our power in numbers, drew energy from that, and got pumped up. Along with all workers, APIs participated in all work action from informational picketing to organizing workers for the strike and taking part in the bargaining team that reached our historic contract. We shut the schools down. We went on a 3-day strike and won. We won a 30% wage increase, bonus for workers who worked during the pandemic, more hours for many workers, and expanded fully paid healthcare benefits to thousands of workers. As API workers and labor leaders, we can't underestimate our power. We can't be aggressive in our personal lives, be the kings and queens of our home, then choose to be quiet and not want to make trouble at our workplace. It's time to take space, grab the mic, and make good trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. That is truly inspiring. Up next, we have Jigme, our brother from SEIU, Minnesota, and Iowa. Jigme will discuss the driver's license for all initiative and the climate justice bill, highlighting their impact on low-income API communities and working people of all backgrounds.
Thank you, James. Happy Heritage Month. My name is Jigme. I'm the Executive Vice President of SCI Healthcare Minnesota and Iowa, and the second Vice President of our API caucus. So I've been with SCIE for 21 years now. 16 of those years have been as an elected leader. I was born in the foothills of the Himalayas. It's a small town called Kalimpong in India. So I'm also a Tibetan refugee. My country, Tibet, contains the biggest ice fields outside of the Arctic and the Antarctic. And the glaciers in Tibet are melting, currently melting, and they say that by 2050, it will completely melt. And this is happening because of other people's greenhouse gas emission elsewhere in the world. And that impacts the climate change across the world. But in this country, API voices and many stories from countries like mine have always been invisible and never spoken of when it comes to the fight for environmental justice work. So what makes me really proud here in Minnesota is how some of our API leaders, organizations, and our own API caucus were very active at tables, helping shape and lobby one of the most ambitious clean energy state laws in the country. 100% clean energy by 2040. That was amazing. And also, as an immigrant, I understand what it means to live in America without a driver's license. The fear of getting pulled over by police and deported, frustrations about inability to get to work, taking your kids to school, or making to a medical appointment. Things many of us take for granted. In Minnesota, finally, 80,000 undocumented folks will be able to obtain driver's license regardless of their immigration status, thanks to years of organizing by some tireless individuals and organizations. Also, during the 2022 midterm election, our API caucus was able to mobilize a coalition of API groups in Minnesota to organize 2 weeks of the largest API focused GeoTV efforts in the state's history. Today, Minnesota stands as a Democrat trifecta government. We were able to elect 4 new API lawmakers, making it the state with the highest number of API elected leaders who serve on the Council of Asian Pacific Minnesotans. It's a state agency created to advise and disaggregate data for language justice for education, to fighting API hate, to better inform the legislature and the governor on issues that impact our communities. That's why election matters and representation matters. For our communities to succeed in its entirety, we must continue to win economic, gender, immigration, climate, and racial justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Jigme. Thank you, everybody who's spoken today about the work that you're doing, whether you're working as a member or working as a partner organization with SEIU. Thank you so much for your leadership and your commitment to the AA and HPI community. I just have one question for our panelists before we close out today. How can AA and HPI leaders and members foster cross-racial solidarity when politicians want to divide us on issues such as public safety and affirmative action? I'll start with Agnes.
I think that we all kind of have to go outside of our comfort zones. Currently, I'm here in Denver helping out with a campaign to organize security guards. And I've noticed that, you know, a lot of people are afraid to join unions. And I think as leaders, we need to make sure that we engage the members in our locals as well as work, you know, with other locals to ensure that, you know, racial justice is actually being done across the board, no matter what jobs you do, and also engaging in our community, like Yon said earlier. We can't just be complacent anymore because the rich have the money to spend, to spin anything they want in, you know, in commercials, but our power is in the work that we do as labor, and together we are way stronger than them. So I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you, Agnes. Jan?
Thank you. I totally agree with Agnes. So we have to be the coalition together, need to be out of the comfort zone. But I also truly believe that how we do coalition with the not only labor, but how we can build the relationship and working together more in community leaders like Black community or Latinx community, AAPI community, and also indigenous community. I think it is very vital and important for us as a labor to working and building a relationship with the community leaders and then moving together in those issues that when politician or big corporate try to divide us, and we need to be in as a community and workers and come together to be stronger and fighting back with these two giants. And I think that's the only way we can win.
Thank you, Jan. Jigme?
There you go. So every time a Black body is murdered in this country, API communities across have joined in solidarity, sharing in our collective trauma, and showed up for our Black siblings who continue to mourn and hurt. And together, we took to the streets after the Atlanta spa shooting or during the Stop API Hate to speak out against anti-Asian hate incidents, um, which is not getting enough attention. Racial resentment against Asians had been a popular sort of pattern in American history, turning one group of people against another race of people to distract, deflect blame, to divide and spark fear. So what I feel like the politicians and the corporations, like my sister talked about, need to do is to stop using the model minority and the Asian advantage stereotypes, right? Designed to protect institutionalized white supremacy and validate anti-Black racism. They need to stop weaponizing, scapegoating, and gaslighting our Asian communities' issues to justify anti-Blackness and colonialism. They need to stop calling for increased police surveillance to fix racism. If these political leaders and corporations have the privilege and power and choose to be silent during our cross-racial solidarity, no matter which race they come from, it is another form of racism and oppression. You know, so on this sort of Heritage Month, as a community, we need to continue to organize by doing more transformative and accountable work so that we can continue to disrupt history and cycles of oppression and make a commitment to make cross-racial solidarity a daily lifelong practice versus a reaction to a big incident. Thank you.
Thank you, Jigme. And thank you, everybody who was on this panel today. And while I'm sure we have enough to discuss for days, in the interest of time, I do need to wrap up and thank our wonderful panelists for lending their voices and sharing their stories today. I feel so inspired by all of them, and I hope you do as well. And thank you to everybody who joined us today, especially our AA and HPI members. Your contributions to our union and our movement cannot be underestimated and do not go unnoticed. Let's continue to uplift and empower each and every person in the union and work together to build a future where our voices are heard, our rights are protected, and our influence grows. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.